excited. Hey, what is up guys? MKBHD here. And so this morning, I sent out a tweet that got a little traction, may have ruffled some feathers. I was comparing the highest end Tesla Model S to the highest end brand new Porsche Taycan Turbo S. And let's just say I ran out of characters. Like doing the whole lineup thing requires a lot of spaces, and so there's just tons of characters wasted by using the spacebar. So I didn't really get to say as many things as I wanted to say, but I sent it anyway. But there's much more to the comparison between those two cars. So that is what this video is. Let's talk about that new Porsche Taycan. So it's been teased forever in prototypes and concepts, but earlier today in a majestic international collaborative event, Porsche finally officially unveiled the Taycan, their first fully electric sports car. They rolled it on a stage, they went over the official numbers, the specs, the inspiration behind it, what it was capable of, what they think it'll be good at, and how much work they've put into this over the past couple of years to make it just as good as their other combustion engine cars, the whole deal. So naturally I'm watching this, and as a car enthusiast, but more of specifically an electric car person, I'm sort of naturally benchmarking the numbers in my head against, let's be real, the gold standard for electric cars right now, which is the Tesla Model S. So on stage, they talked about things like range numbers, their acceleration, performance, top speed, and then features, and of course we get to see the design and the interior and much more. And there's also a ton of little things, just intangibles really, that were also not talked about, and I didn't expect them to compare themselves to Tesla on stage. They're of course comparing it to the rest of their cars, but there's a lot to unpack. So first of all, there's actually three versions of this car. There's the Taycan Turbo, and the Taycan Turbo S. And before you ask, no, there are no actual turbos in this car. Turbo requires exhaust, and this car doesn't have turbos, but they couldn't get away from the name, so that's the name. The baseline Taycan starts at $150,900, and the highest end Taycan Turbo S will start at $185,000. So pretty premium. So the key specs, when you think about daily driving an electric car, this is something that always comes up, is two main things. One, the range, how far can you go on a charge? And two, charging. So how fast does it charge and where can you charge? And so with every new electric car that comes out, these are always the first two things I look at. You got to nail those two things and then the rest will follow. If you don't get those two things, then you're sort of working at an uphill battle against the rest of the electric car world. Now, personally, I've been waiting for a while now for another electric car to come along and actually start shipping that competes with what Tesla's doing in those two things, whether it's from a new company, a new startup in Rivian, or an old company from Audi or Porsche. Somebody's got to get those two main things right and then do the rest well. So along comes the Porsche Taycan. We all know Porsche. Porsche's done an incredible job with cars for a very long time now. The Taycan is their first electric vehicle. They bring it out on stage and they give us the numbers. So the Taycan, every version of it will have a 100 kilowatt hour battery, same as the high-end Tesla Model S, 93.4 kilowatt hours of which will be usable, and that'll give you a 280 mile range. That's what they said on stage, which is pretty good. It's not, I think 300 miles right now is about the benchmark for what you'd want out of a higher priced one, and this is a really highly priced one, so you'd want it to be over that, but 280 miles is pretty good. But it's the charging technology that was particularly impressive. On stage, they talked about peak charging power of 270 kilowatts, which is even higher than Tesla Model 3's highest end peak charging rate of 250 kilowatts. So that's real fast. And then here's how it breaks down against the rest of the spec for spec compared to the highest end Teslas that are already on the road. And trust me, I know, specs aren't the whole story for a car. But here's how the specs line up as far as what you're getting for your money. So for starting price, the highest end Tesla starts at $105,000 for performance version. The Taycan, $185,000. So both expensive, of course, one clearly more than the other, but very premium. For your 0 to 60 time, electric cars have been killing this, but your Tesla is 2.4 seconds 0 to 60, Taycan 2.8 seconds. Not a huge difference on paper, 0.4 seconds, but for people who have driven these cars, you know the difference between 2.8 and 2.4 is kind of crazy. And then for top speed, the Taycan, 161 miles an hour, the Tesla, 163 miles an hour, basically the same. They're electronically limited. They don't go much higher, but that's fine. But what's fascinating actually is the Porsche has a 2-speed transmission. I'm assuming an automatic transmission, and I don't think that's anything I've seen in an electric car before, but the low ratio is for your launches and for getting off the line quickly, and then at a certain point you switch to the second gear for your higher speed. That's pretty interesting. And then peak charging rate, the Taycan 270 kilowatts, Model S, which doesn't go as high as the new Model 3 chemistry, 200 kilowatts. So that's an impressive difference, and I'll say that's gonna get you about 80% of your battery in 20 minutes of charging. I love that. So pretty comparable in a lot of ways, but that's just numbers on paper. They also have a lot of things to compare that are not on paper. Like, I happen to think they're both pretty damn good looking cars. The Tesla, of course, I've been driving for a while. I wrapped it. I'm pretty biased. I love it. The new Taycan looks pretty familiar to Porsche, but with some new design cues. It's got kind of the same shape as the Panamera with a little bit of 911. It's a bit smaller. It has the quad LED daytime running lights, which look dope. And then it has those arrow slots down to the side of the headlights on the front of the wheels, which of course also kind of make it look like it's crying in a way, but I don't mind that at all. I think it looks clean. The big bar taillight at the back, that I originally liked a lot, but Andrew also introduced mixed feelings to me when he says they look like a Lincoln MKZ, which is not so hot, but I like the bar anyway. And I think they look nice when it's turned on, especially at night. And then, of course, those white wheels. So if you get the Turbo S, that high-end version will have the 21-inch wheels with the body matching color. I'm a big fan of that Stormtrooper look. Plus, the Taycan has a regular trunk, not a hatchback, but it's still a pretty big trunk, and it has a front trunk. And then nothing too crazy as far as aero, just a clean design like you'd expect from Porsche. Then the interior. So I haven't seen this in person yet, but this is exactly where you'd expect Porsche to really shine. They've always had high quality materials and used tons of metal and leather and buttons and switches. It's always been like the opposite of a Tesla interior. For this, they've done a bunch more screens. You still have a bunch of knobs and buttons on the steering wheel, but then they have 4 other screens on the interior of the car and not too many buttons, but they do keep it classy with a little analog clock in the middle there. To each their own, of course. I think they're sort of taking some cues from existing electric cars. I personally really like the minimal interior of my Tesla, where you just have the giant screen. The only buttons are on the steering wheel, windows and mirrors, and the hazard lights. But again, this is a sort of a hybrid between the two. But where I really think these cars start to separate themselves is everyday driving versus track driving. To me, the Tesla seems to have the advantage right now in everyday driving, just logistically, and the Porsche with track driving. Here's why. The Tesla Model S has the longer range, but it also has the supercharger network. And I've mentioned all these little intangibles that aren't on the spec sheet before. This is one of them. I go on road trips all the time for the sports I play and what I do. New York City to Philadelphia and back this past weekend for Ultimate Frisbee, or New York City to Providence, Rhode Island and back for that 5G video you guys might have watched recently. And never once along the way, with the 300 plus miles of range and the superchargers, all tons of them along the roads and highways and rest stops and malls, none of the times that I ever really have to think about, am I going to make it to the next charger or am I going to have to charge? That's the beauty of an always growing supercharger network. It would have been sick if the Porsche could have used Tesla's supercharging network. That would have been awesome. And I even think they've tried to allow that in the past. Tesla's made the thing open, but no one seems to want to take them up on that. So the Porsche Taycan will not use the superchargers. And then the Model S is also a bit of a bigger car. The hatchback is a ridiculous amount of room in the back. I also happened to see a picture of someone sitting in the back of the Taycan, and it did look a little bit cramped. I don't know if someone's 6'3" can try it out and see what it seems like, but little things like that sort of add up. And then on top of all of that, there's autopilot, which you may not ever use, but for me, in traffic, it's a lifesaver. So put these things all on top of each other, and there's just a lot of everyday driving things that I think stack up in favor of Tesla. But for people that really care about driving and tracking their car, I have almost no doubt that the Porsche is going to drive better than the Tesla. Now, it might not ever beat the Tesla off the line in a straight line, a drag race 0 to 60, but Porsche made constant references throughout their whole presentation about driving this car around a track, doing laps, pushing it around a circuit, just like they would with the rest of their normal gas cars. The Porsche is actually 5,200 pounds, so like 2.5 tons. It is actually heavier than the Tesla, which is already super heavy, but Porsche's been excellent at driving dynamics, specifically in sports cars, for so long now that I feel like they'll be able to cancel that out. They also bragged about their record-breaking Nürburgring lap time of 7 minutes and 42 seconds when Tesla doesn't even have an official time because pushing the car at 100% for that long will start to overheat and limit power. And on stage, they dropped the spec that they can launch their car, quote, many times before power limiting. They didn't really say how many times is many times, but that's one of their key advantages is repeat performance, extended use. The reason it can do this is because it runs on an 800 volt architecture, which is double the normal 400, which lets it use thinner wires and less cooling and push the same high power but run cooler. Now, of course, these are all things that the new Tesla Roadster two-door intends to fix, according to Elon, by the time it comes out in maybe 2020. But that will definitely be more of a track car with less focus on everyday driving. But hey, maybe that's another comparison we'll do someday. But right now, we're working with what exists. But look, here's my bottom line about the Taycan. It got my attention because, to me, it looks like Tesla's best competition yet. And that's important. I think a lot of people, when they saw this came out, sort of got in their camps. Like, I've been driving a Tesla long enough to know that car people, either hate Tesla or love Tesla. Like, there isn't really much of an in-between. And so when they saw this come out and they see a comparison with the Tesla, they probably think, oh, this piece of masterful German engineering will just destroy this American piece of plastic and garbage. That's really the way some people think. But look, there's room in the electric car market for more than one premium sedan. And I'm just psyched that we finally have some sort of choice, because we know that competition back and forth between these two companies makes better products, and then we win. So the comparison on paper, whatever, it's fun. I will still keep looking at and comparing, those key metrics of electric cars when they come out, range, performance, how these things charge. But to say like one is definitely better than the other, or one, especially when you say the headline killer, the Tesla killer, that's unnecessary. I actually think it's fair to say Tesla really pushed Porsche into working this hard on this first electric car of theirs in the first place. They knew that they had to get their foot in the door and put a good car out and actually compete. So I'm happy we got this, and I'm excited for the many future high-end electric cars that will follow it. Mix up the market a little bit. I guess now we just got to see how it drives, right? Porsche, you think what I'm thinking? Autofocus episode? Yes? Yeah? Maybe? We'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.